Yes. Yeah. So yeah, here we are. We've got Rutendo on the platform tonight.
Mhm.
Yes. So Rutendo, I want to before we I want to be methodical with how we engage in this conversation, because the controversies, the public controversies, the question that have arisen has not escaped the public attention, and certainly they've not escaped me. We have seen narratives being written. We have seen conversations being had. So much was said. But I want to ask you this as a starting point. That I understand that there's been a wave of public criticism directed at you from various figures. I'm not mentioning any names, and without going into personal disputes. How do you interpret the timing and intensity of these reactions, given what you have been riding on, the constitutional amendment number 3? Over to you,
Thanks.
Rutendo.
Thanks, Jed. Thanks. For me, controversies are very good and very important at times, because what happens is that rumors give people an opportunity or a window to introspect and to interrogate the personality, character, and values of a person that is being presented in front of them. So if you're running for office, if you're a politician, and if you come up with public ideas that you become a public figure or an opinion maker, there is going to be controversies that are going to follow you. And when these controversies follow you, people have to ask questions, they've got to interrogate, and then they've got to vet which of the things that are said about you are true, which ones are false. And at the end of the day, within that interrogation, people get to know who you are, your personality, your character. Now, we live in a country of people who are self serving. Zimbabweans are known to be self centered, self serving, especially the most motivated and the most ambitious of us. We are about self. I'm about making money. I'm about trying to develop myself to the highest possible standard I can, get as many accolades, get as many comforts. That is generally the character of the Zimbabwean. And this character has gradually eroded our society. You can no longer go to the police and simply get somebody to do an affidavit for you without asking for a bribe. You can even get to the police station and tell you that the people who do these affidavits are not there because you don't have a cool drink in hand. And it has become such a corrosive characteristic in our country and in our society that we no longer have a moral base. We no longer have purpose and meaning. Everything is about self-interest and gain. So when public figures introduce themselves to you, as a Zimbabwean, it is imperative for you to test their character, to test their standing, to test their value system, because you could easily just fall in for anybody who is just self-serving, looking to use people and looking to step on people in order to get with where they want to get to. So for me, these controversies have two dual purposes. One is the intention of the parties that have brought up these controversies. And number two, the benefit to the people that are trying to test the character of Rutendo to determine
Right.
whether he is the righteous man that he presents himself to be, or is just another self-serving individual who's just looking to use people and numbers to get to where he wants to get to. So, from the perspective of the people that have started the controversy, the intention has been to reduce my standing so that the argument I'm bringing to the table is eroded. They have to poke holes in my credibility. It's actually a psychological operation, a psyop that is being done by people who know what they're doing. He is presenting himself as a critique of a bill, but we want the people to think and consider whether he is righteous enough and has got the right intentions to be bringing this issue to them. And as such, you saw a number of controversies. The only problem with the psychological operation is it then added too many issues. Number one, he's a CIA agent. Number two, he's paid by he's paid by Simon Radland. Number three, he's bitter
Yes.
that he did not get $1 million and a Land Cruiser. Number four, he's bitter
And
that
$4 million. Yeah? I've had $4 million. Come on now. Yeah? Kanono kumbiro mari kari kumkoma ni andionewo kamdara.
Wangu. So the problem is that with the overzealousness and them being overwhelmed by my criticism and the points I was bringing up and their inability to poke holes in the argument, they went after me. But what they did is they were not coordinated. In the heat of the moment, in the shock of events, and in their masters trying to get a result, each one came with a different angle. He brought investors from South Africa. His investors did not follow process and they were arrested and deported from Zimbabwe. He's bitter about that. So people who were looking, they could have interrogated whether these issues were really about my personality flaws, my self-interest, my greediness, but there were too many issues put in their faces all at once to the extent that the credibility of these allegations started to become questionable.
Right.
Then, of course, once the frivolous charges began to lose credence, they then began to take personalities to use against me. And that's when you saw, I won't hesitate to say some of the names. You saw Temba Mliskwa waking up at 3 in the morning yesterday to add something to say, I am an extortionist trying to extort people in order for me to make money. And soon after that, on the same day, at about 4 in the morning, and you wonder, who are these people who are not sleeping at night? To the extent that they wake up and start making allegations and posts. And these are men with rather reasonable standing in society. I mean, Temba was an MP. That's a respectable position. And when he was an MP, he fought corruption and he was very much about accountability. So when he attacks someone like me with such an allegation, it carries a bit of water. And in the same vein, we had Joshua Maponga also rising up to make allegations about the fact that I just make frivolous allegations on social media, talking about monies that I'm owed, yet I don't even have a receipt or an invoice to prove it.
Right.
So right there was built now the last constructs of an attack on my character that were supposed to stick. And because they know that I am dedicated to trying to drive this agenda of us looking at this cab bill, they felt that I would be conflicted. I would be ambivalent on whether to answer them or to continue to stick with my cause of talking about the cab issue. But they knew that if I choose to stick to the cab issue, I will appeal to a certain audience who will say, wonderful, you have stuck to the role. But I would also then alienate a certain group that is important to them who will then question my character. And once they conclude that my character is flawed, will stop listening to the argument. And that was their own internal audience. The problem is that this argument is not that this argument is affecting the opposition and people opposed generally to government. The problem is that the argument is becoming persuasive internally among their own constituents and among their own leaders who you heard Temba Mlisko complaining about that they are no longer defending the president and they're advancing CAB 3.
Right.
So that message he wrote at 3 in the morning was an indication that the battle is not being lost outside.
Is the cookie crumbling? Are the cookies crumbling? Is this what you're telling me? Is this what you're telling me? The cookie is crumbling
inside.
Right.
They are wondering why it is that certain high-ranking ZANU-PF officials who are very vocal, who are very erudite in the way they communicate, are silent about CAB 3. They are not promoting it. They are not condemning it, but they're also not pushing it. Right. When the president is criticized, when CAB 3 is criticized by Rutendo Matinyarare, some people who stood up to fight Rutendo Matinyarare in the previous fights have not chosen to stand up. They've kept quiet. They've not put the effort to try and give credence in decampaigning what he was saying. There is open dissent within some of their WhatsApp groups. There is open questioning of the why this thing is necessary. Even on social media here and on Scotty has witnessed some ZANU-PF coming onto his spaces and saying outright that this is nonsense. We don't want this. It belongs to a few people. So
Right.
there's a crisis. This is why at 3 o'clock in the morning, Themba Mliswa was not sleeping. He was writing long essays about how it is that no one is defending the president, and that is a problem. And soon after that, he then wrote another long essay talking about how it is that I am an extortionist who's just trying to make easy money. What is that meant to do? It's meant to say, don't listen to him because he is just here for money and he is not really here on a serious issue. He's hoping that you're not listening to the argument, you're not listening to the points, you're not listening or criticism of each and every clause, and also you're not listening to us interrogating whether the president that we have now warrants and deserves a term extension that can
Uh-huh.
justify us changing the law of our constitution for the future.
But are you not angry though? Because the monies that are being banded about here, 4 million. You didn't get the 4 million. Are you not angry though? Because in the I was supposed to be paid, but I didn't get this money. So I might as well go against the grain and say, good, these people, they do not deserve to get what this bill is proposing.
All right. So let me put it to you like this. There were two parallel systems that were at play. When we first started doing this issue of sanctions, and we then started getting invited into the system by the presidency and certain advisors of the president, we got in close. And the first thing that happened when we went for the first meeting with one of the advisors of the president, who was given the role to be my handler, together with someone else that I went with to that meeting, was that he asked us a question. He says, both of you have done a lot of work for government. You've spoken positively, you've told positive stories, you fought real PR battles against this government. I mean, against detractors of this government, particularly in
Yes,
South Africa,
yes.
where we were based. And he said, why have you not invoiced the government before?
Right.
So my answer was, I can't invoice the government because I don't know who to invoice. Moreover, when we're doing this job, we never did it for payment. We did it out of national pride.
So where did the payment issue come in?
He was asking.
How did it come in?
It came in the conversation. So I was invited. I was taken to the house by the person who works for this gentleman, who then said, let's go, pick me up at the airport. And at the airport, he came with my hotel accommodation. He's the one who had booked the accommodation through this person who had called us for the meeting. And I was given my per diem. You're coming to stay. Here's an envelope for you. That's for you to spend on your own and do what you need to do. And let's go and see this man. So before I even go to meet him, I'm given my goodies and flown business class, and then we go to his house. Get to his house. The man knows everything about me. Every article I've written, how I wrote it, the meaning in the article. I've never seen articulation of that level. And a person who studied a person they're about to meet. And my colleague that I went with had previously gone for a meeting 6 months prior with another project separate to the issue of sanctions. We had written a proposal, he had been invited to Harare, because what had happened is that this man had formed a political party. When he formed a political party, he invited me to come and become his secretary general. I told him, no, my brother, I'm not interested in politics, number one. Number two, I think that the vehicle of change that we have in our country is actually ZANU-PF. And we had the back and forth with him trying to persuade me that we are the younger generation. It's our turn to change this system because Madara have failed. And I said to him, my brother, we don't have what it takes. And because I don't have an interest in politics, I don't have the spirit and the heart for it. I think, why don't we look at working from within ZANU-PF and changing things from within? Fortunately, that gentleman was persuaded. So he decided to start telling a different story about Zimbabwe. Because I was saying, you keep criticizing. And then you criticize in the same forum with the opposition, with the South Africans are now also criticizing us. We're demeaning ourselves in public. Let's take a stance to speak a good story about this country and try and change it from within. When we have family issues and family problems internally, we debate them and discuss them inside in a way that is not going to make other people look down upon us and frown upon us and make us these caricatures that we as Zimbabweans have become. He started telling a different story, positive story.
Mm-hmm.
And his
Mm-hmm.
voice is big, not in Zimbabwe, but in Africa as a whole and in South Africa. But when he began to
Right.
do that, he began to get enemies, of course. South Africans began to hate him. They say, go back home. Don't need to be here, and so forth and so on. But ZANU-PF took notice. They took notice of the change in narrative. So quickly, this advisor that we're talking about, a very wealthy advisor, said, come to Harare. He went, he met this advisor plus another multimillionaire, and they spoke. And they said, your voice, how can we work together? And these guys had gone to school together with this advisor, so they know each other well.
Right.
So then they said, write us a proposal. And we want to work with you and Rutendo. Write us a proposal. Let's hear what it is that you guys can offer. So this guy came to me. He had an idea that we would do a show for young Zimbabweans with great
Mm-hmm.
ideas who don't have
Mm-hmm.
funding and finance. Number two, he had another one of going around and just looking at how it is that social responsibility exercises can be done in order to uplift poor people in all corners of the country. And then going around and telling good stories about what's happening in agriculture and so forth. Then I added one of my own ideas out of the 7 ideas that he brought. I just said, I want to tell the good Zimbabwe story. Just
Absolutely.
good stories about what's happening in Zimbabwe. Let's lift the morality of our people. So he doesn't like writing. So he got me to write the document. So I wrote the document, he proofread it, we fixed it together, he took it to Harare. 7-pager. And in Harare, it seems it took off. So soon he left South Africa, he went to stay in Zim. So while you were staying in Zim, this is when my campaign on anti-sanctions was moving fast. United Nations came, Congress came to meet with Pollard, and they did an impact assessment. So things were moving there now. So that's when they
Yes.
reached out to me. But he was told to reach out to me, but what he didn't know is that the son of the president had already reached out to me. And had
Yeah, because I saw a conversation around that in terms of who introduced who to who, and in the long response, the individual did not want to go deeper into that conversation. Maybe he was now appreciating, or maybe he now had the information that the son of the president was the one was involved EDC, because he said, I don't want to go deeper into but he then started to question you in terms of if the son of the president was instrumental in this introduction. So why are you going against the president?
right. So I don't blame him for his perspective, because he was given
Right.
the impression by then he was working for that advisor. So
Uh-huh.
that was now his boss. His boss told him, I want us to talk to your friend Rutendo, who we talked about previously, of you doing a proposal with him. So in his mind, his boss has not spoken to me. There's no other channels of communication that are happening except between him and his boss, and he is the conduit towards me. What he didn't know
Right.
is that behind the scenes, the son of the president had already reached out. Now, you are asking the question, why would I be a critic of the president on this particular issue, yet,
Yes.
the son has reached out? If you look, I've been invited to join the CIO. I refused. They had a
Really?
communications department. They had a communications department they were creating. They needed good
Right.
communicators who were going to tell the good Zimbabwe story before me and this gentleman even began to talk about this proposal. But I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be contained. One.
Uh-huh.
I also didn't want to work for the organization because the organization's image was a bit damaged. Even though
Right.
I would have worked in a capacity that was not linked to the organization, I still didn't want that proximity. Number 3, we didn't agree on numbers as well, because if I'm going to change my life, leave my business, leave my kids, leave my everything, to go into such an organization I wasn't really too keen to be in, I felt that it was going to be, they have to reward me adequately for me to accept that. Number 4, they could not separate for me doing business with the government and serving the government in communication terms and making sure that there's going to be a wall between the government and ZANU-PF. They couldn't guarantee me that because I didn't want that political affiliation to a political party, because fighting sanctions required me to capture everybody else. I had also been offered to join ZANU-PF. And I've said it clearly here, and I'll say it again. I had been even offered that, why don't you become the spokesperson of ZANU-PF? And I said, that's madness. We've got people like Patrick Chinamasa there. We've got Muchangwa, who is
Muchangwa, in the kind of position, yes,
in his own respect, in terms of his knowledge about ZANU-PF. How do I come in? I don't know the slogan. I have never been in a branch. I've never been in a cell. I don't know the policy and ethos of ZANU-PF. All I know about ZANU-PF is what I've read in books. How do you offer me such a position? I felt it was a trap. And I felt that it was basically making me clash with people who already hated me on the pretext that I want to jump through the window into the party. I wasn't interested in that. So I said, you can't put me in such a position. And those offers had been made by very important people. But I said no. And they said, you shouldn't worry about all that, what you're talking about. We would deal with that. I said, no. I don't want a situation where I'm clashing with people who...
there's an issue that was spoken about by Alex Magaisa, may so rest in peace. The issue of compromat. Do you believe this was a way of creating that, so that you get tied into the system?
Yes, and I've always felt that there was this attempt to bring me into the system. Once I am in the system, then I'm easier to control. Because I think some people who within our system, there are people with intelligence skills to assess character, to assess personality. And I think they had seen that I've got a rebellious character. And the need to control that rebellious character was always there. And I believe that central to me not being paid for work I did for Sanctions, central to me not getting recognition for that work, is because I am a renegade who is refusing to fall in line. And you have to understand that this renegade falling in line is a thing they've been working on for a while. Because when I started Sanctions, I started it with an organization called ZWAUS. This organization called ZWAUS was mine, with a couple of people that I knew and no other people outsiders internally. And then I was told to dissolve ZWAUS and to form a group with other people who were also doing anti-sanctions, so that we have one organization. That was the first step of them trying to bring me in line and to make me controllable. And when I refused to dissolve my organization and to create this institution with people like Chitando, people like Brian Chivongodze, they then said, why are you a selfish person? Why are you this person that wants to work alone, to take credit alone? Why don't you form this organization with others? They touched a nerve for me there, because what they were saying is you're selfish. And I don't want to be seen as selfish. I don't want to be seen as someone who can't work with others. And they said, and until you work with others, you can't get resources. Government can't work with you in an institution that belongs to you alone. And you can achieve so much if you join others. So then I was forced, having refused the CIO offer, having refused joining the party, I was now forced to join this organization, and we created an institution, which I believe really, really achieved good results because we were working together with others.
Yes.
But there was also sabotage from within. We had a lot of challenges because of that. Okay?
Right.
And so these were some of the things that were happening. So anyway, by the time I meet this guy, he knows so much about me. He's paid my accommodation. He's paid my transport. He's flown me in. Hence, I don't agree with what was said yesterday, that the money that I was paying was to pay back for accommodation. I mean, we're dealing with a billionaire. The billionaire paid everything. He paid the business flight. He paid my accommodation. I even stayed in Zimbabwe in a hotel for 6 months while gathering evidence for our case. So there was no need for this businessman to have his worker paying my accommodation, paying my food, and paying for my transport, because he had done that already. He even paid me a per diem on top of that. And why would I need to be paying back money for a business trip that this guy invited me on? You get what?
So is this where the accusations of you being an extortionist or being a fraudster? Is this where this is coming in?
So you remember? So we said that this guy then asked, "Why don't you bill for all the work you've been doing?" This is our first meeting with this guy. I said, "I haven't billed because I didn't do it to be paid, and number two, I don't know
Right.
where to send the invoice to." He said, "You've done a lot for government. You should bill." But anyway, I said, "Anyway, I don't think I've done enough work to require to be paid. But once we remove sanctions, and now that I know you as the advisor of the president, I will know where to bill and I will bill." Then it was fine. So we then had our discussions about the sanctions. He wanted me to do sanctions. He wanted me also to do something for him personally in terms of marketing and PR. He paid me upfront to do PR for him and to write a document. Initially, he asked for me to write a document. He communicated it to my brother who was speaking yesterday. My brother brought that to me. I refused. Said, "I'm done writing papers. I'm done writing documents. People have stolen my ideas." And that was because when I had spoken and interacted with the CIO, I'd given them a lot of documents. They'd taken my ideas, implemented them without including me. This includes getting SADC to march against sanctions. That was my idea. It includes putting people to camp outside the US embassy. My idea was to blockade, but they chose to have people camping outside. And so those things had been taken from me and I got nothing. I never got involved. So then this guy went back and said, he doesn't want to write this proposal. So this guy said, "I'll give him a certain amount of money."
Right.
Give him $100,000 for him to write me a proposal, and that proposal I'll pay him now. He gave my friend the money and he said, "Give me your account number." The amount was put in my bank account. Okay. And this is not the amount of money we gave the 10% from. This was done from the top, and he even said in front of my pal, "You are not getting a cent from this because you get a salary." So this guy must do the work.
So this had nothing to do with the 10%.
Nothing to do with the 10%. He told me, "I want you to write a proposal for me. I want you to use this money to pay any debts that you have in South Africa. Pay your debts. Once you are paid up, I want you to focus on the work we need to do."
Right.
So now we've got an agreement that once I'm done with sanctions, I will bring my bill. I will not ask for money for anything I've done before, but I will bring my bill once the sanctions are gone, since you have asked me why I'm not billing government. So we get into an agreement, we go to a meeting with the president, and the meeting with the president was a very short meeting, basically to say, "Gentlemen, this what we're doing has got the blessing of this man in front of you." Then we came back to the office. Once we got back to the office, we then started getting into nitty-gritties about how we're going to do this job. He then said, "Go back to South Africa. I'm waiting for approval from where we are coming from, which is the president, and then we will let you know." So the president could have come back and said, "We don't want you to go do this case in South Africa." Or you could have said, "We want you to use another avenue." But
So the president was all in. At this stage, the president was all in.
At this stage, I have been sent back until an answer and a response or approval has come from the president. So there's no approval yet. We don't know if he's all in.
All right, okay.
So I go back to South Africa. A month later, he flies me back using my friend. "Give me your ticket. You've been called back for another meeting." I then go back, I then come back, and he says, "My friend told me we are now coming to talk about the details of money." So I said, "If I were talking about the details of money, I'm coming with my advocate." My friend didn't like the advocate. He's like, "Why are you bringing an advocate? Come alone. We know you. My boss knows you. He doesn't know your advocate." I said, "No, I want to bring my advocate because if I don't travel with my advocate, once we start talking money, there's always going to be an assumption that I've stolen the money and eaten the money alone."
Right.
My friend says, "Leave your advocate. Moreover, we can get you better advocates. This guy of yours is not bright. He's not that great. So why you want to bring him?" I said, "He's the one I want to work with. And moreover, I've been given him by the system and I get along with him." Because for me, my advocate was one of the few people who was willing to go against the Americans in a court. He's a person who didn't want a US visa. So there were very few people like that. And he was smart and streetwise. Anyway, my friend then eventually accepts and he gets us 2 tickets. And there are photos of me and my advocate on a plane, business class, coming back to Harare. From there, we went to our meeting. In the meeting, I'm asked, "Right, how much do you guys need for this fight?" I said, "I refuse to speak. Here is the advocate. I want the advocate to speak." Advocate begins to speak. This is how much we need. And I think the number was about $6 million because we were competing with people who had about a kitty of about 24 million and above. There were other
Right.
banks, Biden himself, and the other members of government in the South African banks represented by the Banking Association of South Africa. The guy then, the businessman then says, fine, this is not a lot of money, but I refuse to pay for all of it alone. Because if I pay for all of it alone, it's going to look like I am in an agenda to personalize this fight. Yet this fight is a national fight. I want you to focus on bringing sanctions down from the country. And then when you are done, you deal with us as the individuals. But for now, let's remove the sanctions on the people on the country.
Right.
Right. But he says that, but in the same meeting, he also says, but guys, don't be too quick to remove these sanctions.
I got
Because right now we are in a place where we are buying companies cheap. It is an opportunity that is a once in a lifetime. And if we don't get these companies now, if you remove the sanctions too quickly, foreigners will come in and foreign capital will come in. They'll buy all these companies, all these local businesses.
Is this the time when SADC it gotten involved, set the 25th of is it 25th of October
Yes.
date to say that we want Zimbabwe sanctions to go, and yet inside we've got individuals who want sanctions to remain.
Right. So he then says, as a starting point, how much work have you done, lawyers, so that I can pay you that money now and pay off what you've already done? Because irrespective of the fact that the president had not given us a go-ahead, what had happened is CIO has got a guy who had gone, and he's a guy who's in the papers, Linus Mafum. He had gone to the media, and he had made the media publish that Rutendo Matinyarare and Simba Chitando have launched a case against the United States government.
Yes.
That had gone public, I think, in January already. So there was already pressure and expectation for us to be in a case, and the president ended approved. Then Simba Chitando went ahead and launched the case the moment he knew I had gone for a meeting in Harare and seen the president. He launched the case even before the approval came through. So by the time we went back, there was already a response from the banks.
And
the banks were saying, we have got sanctions on not Zimbabwe, but Zimbabweans who are corrupt. And the person who's corrupt is this, the advisor of the president.
Oh dear.
And it's written in the papers. And they're giving their reasons. Although we are saying, but you are punishing without trial, so that's illegal according to the South African Constitution. So Simba now had to present this to the principal to say, your name is there, your company is there, and so we need a response, we need an affidavit to respond, and we've already done work. So the guy says, how much work have you done? Tell me a number. I'll give you that now. Then you go back and then I will send you the money to finish everything off. And I will go, there's a kitty that I know somewhere in one of the departments that has got a kitty specifically, a slush fund for the kind of activities that you're doing. I sit on that board. I'll make sure that money is released.
Right.
So the 6 million you guys need for this battle, it's secured. Said fine. So the advocate gives a number, says that this is the money that is required. The advocate was on an understanding that everything you charge, you must make sure that 50% of that will come to me for my marketing, my strategy, and my work and lobby.
Excellent.
But when the money was paid, the advocate was going through a patch. So I didn't want the advocate to be worried about rentals and to be worried about other issues because he'll be forced to do other cases and not focus on this case. So I forfeited my 50% and I gave it to the advocate and said, you do the legal stuff, pay yourself and the lawyers in South Africa, focus only on this case, and then I will recoup my money some other time in future. Because I was not in a bad financial situation. One, I had been paid the 100,000 to do the proposal, and there were other monies coming from other places. So,
is there a trail for all these things? Is there a trail?
Yeah, absolutely, a paper trail for everything.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So from that money that was paid, that's when we then paid my friend his percentage from that, and we paid him 10% of what was due to the advocate, and not what was due to the South Africans.
Ah.
Right. And of course, he was saying, I've done the work. I run around, I come pick you up from the airport, I put you up in the hotels, I make sure you're happy, which is fair. All right. But it was also just a token of appreciation. And so that was that. The case starts going on. The advocates go wild over and above the work that they'd been paid for. They started working. The banks are responding. They responded back to the banks, and so forth. 8 months down the lane, we're still not paid
Wow.
the rest
Okay.
of the money. The
Mm-hmm.
advocates have now done 10 times work, and I see Tabani Mpofu here. He knows that lawyers don't work without being paid or without a deposit, right?
Oh, exactly. I support them. My
But
missus is a lawyer. She tells you, "Good maripa mberi mdara."
Chitando understood that this case was a landmark case for the country. And he knew that we were dealing with people with real money, and so we will be paid ultimately. And the president has approved the work, so we will get paid at the end of the day. So the job continues. I then begin to put pressure because the South African guys are now saying, we don't want to keep working without money. Because some of us, we do live hand to mouth and we need money.
We need money.
I
Yes.
start putting pressure on our principal. But I go to my friend. Friend, we're not getting paid. Friend is dilly-dallying, doesn't understand the pressure that we are in South Africa and the threats to go to media. So I skip him. The boss had given me another person. He's got another businessman who had put me. I said, "You're wasting my time giving me my friend here, Maponga, and this other gentleman. These guys are just not getting results. I want money because these guys are putting pressure. And the assumption is that you've given me the rest of the money, and I've used it. That is the pressure I'm getting. They are under the belief that I've been coming to you alone, getting money, and I'm using it."
Right.
You see? So this is when Temba comes in. Temba comes in.
Before Temba, comes in, I want to ask about, the friend, because I'm seeing, in the comment section, the friend is saying, in the meantime, I was paying. You was making some monetary contributions. What was going on, right there?
No, he's not telling the truth. My friend is employed by the billionaire. He works for the billionaire. The
Okay.
billionaire has got no bill that he expects this guy to pay on his behalf. He's an employee of the billionaire. He cannot be paying on behalf of the billionaire.
Right.
I've never taken any money from my friend, except when he's bought a T-shirt from my anti-sanctions movement.
Yes.
So for him to say he was paying nothing, because that would imply that the billionaire does not have money to pay his own way. That doesn't make sense.
Is this not where, Temba, comes in and say, because of the sanctions on the wife and the,
Right.
so, the billionaire now does not have money.
Temba comes in the aspect that he comes to Joburg, meets me. Temba is interested in my relationship with the billionaire, and he's trying to ensconce himself in the middle so that he can make money as well. Because he's under the impression that me and my friend are making so much money, and he's excluded from this process. But in our meeting with the principal says, you guys don't talk too much about this relationship. And you, Rutendo, I know you're friends with Temba. Don't tell Temba what's happening here, because the moment he knows that you and I know each other, he's going to want to bring himself in to make money as well. He has also warned me about my friend to say, my friend, whenever I give you money, don't give him anything. I'm building him a house. I bought him a car. I pay him well. He must not ask you for anything, and don't give him any percentage. So I didn't tell him that I'd given him 10%.
Right.
So Temba comes in. He's interested. So he meets me in Johannesburg. Tell me, I see you are coming to Harare and you are seeing Kukuda. So along the way, I start telling him, hey, Mzukuru Kukuda doesn't want to pay. There are problems. So he says, okay, Sakuru, I talked to him, and I know Temba gets things done. So I told him my issues. We're not getting money for the lawyers. Lawyers are waiting for more money. Simba needs money. The South African lawyers need money to continue. They've done a lot of work. They filed the papers. They got responses from the banks. They took hours and ages to respond back. I was on the ground for 6 months going door to door to every ministry, every company of government and private companies trying to get evidence, going all the way to Zimforce, traveling to Sebo Chemicals, traveling to Zisco Steel. I went all those places looking for evidence and affidavits for the court case. So work was being done big time. Resources were being used. I had been given a car, but I still had to have funds to put petrol, to stay up in hotels, and I had been given enough of an allowance, but a lot of that allowance was going to accommodation. You see, so initially they put me up in the Migos. I then got out of the Migos and said, give me the money you're paying me at the Migos. I will look for alternative accommodation, and then I'll have enough money now to do other running arounds. Because remember, I never took a chunk out of the
Exactly, yeah. Out of the
so I needed
50%,
money to run around.
you forfeited that, yes.
So I forfeited staying in the Migos because the water was cold there, the food was bad, it was pathetic. So I went somewhere else where I was paying half. In fact, probably not even half, maybe even 30%. And then the rest of that money now, I used it to put fuel, to travel across the country to get these affidavits I needed for court. While the lawyers were working in Harare, in South Africa, waiting for the evidence. You see what I'm saying? So now I'm getting to a point where the lawyers are bothering me for alternative accommodation, and then I'll have enough money now to do other running arounds. Because remember, I never took a chunk out of the
out of the 50%,
so I needed money to run around.
You forfeited that, yes.
So I forfeited staying in the Migos because the water was cold there, the food was bad, it was pathetic. So I went somewhere else where I was paying half. In fact, probably not even half, maybe even 30%. And then the rest of that money now, I used it to put fuel, to travel across the country to get these affidavits I needed for court. While the lawyers were working in Harare, in South Africa, waiting for the evidence. You see what I'm saying? So now I'm getting to a point where the lawyers are bothering me big time. And I also need money for the work I'm doing. So I went back to him. Hey, we need you to top up. So it wasn't coming. So then Temba now says, I can get it for you. But then of course he wants a cut. So I said, go and get it for us. So he went. That voice note you hear him talking to me now, him coming with a response now.
Okay.
You see, that's 8 months later. In fact, it was not 8 months later. It was the next January. So it's almost a year since our first transaction. So he starts telling me about, this guy is under sanctions. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's been paid. He's been paid to make an excuse to me about why it is that we cannot get money, but we've started a case. So it was almost reminiscent of what I suspect is happening with Moyo in their case, that they were given money to start the case, and then along the way, they stopped getting money, and the case falls apart. And I believe that that's what was supposed to happen to us. Fortunately, my lawyers were bothering me, but they were still working. Because in the back of their mind, they believe this case is important enough that if we succeed, we will get all the money we need anyway. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I hear
By
you.
then, I've also gone to the DG of CIO and said, listen, we've got a problem. We've got a national case that's in the courts in South Africa. You've seen it in the media. It is assisting the South Africans to start falling on our side. Because remember, South Africa was not convinced that Zimbabwe had an issue of sanctions. They believed that the problem in Zimbabwe was a political problem.
Yes.
And they believed that the issue in Zimbabwe was the government and the opposition are not forming a unity government to deal with that political problem. And they also believed that there was misgovernance happening in the country.
Right.
So I was now tasked by the ambassador in South Africa to say, you have to go back and convince the South Africans that we have a problem of sanctions that are cause of their refugee crisis, and they need to participate and change their foreign policy to start ensuring that they talk about Zimbabwean sanctions. That was first mandate. Second mandate, you need to ensure that they decouple from having a relationship with the opposition. Because remember when we had Zimbabwean Lives Matter, the South Africans came wanting to meet ZANU-PF and the opposition.
Yes.
They were not liking that. So ZANU-PF wanted that. The government wanted that to end. So that was my role. And we achieved the result partially because of the case we had opened
In South Africa.
in South Africa. Plus, Chitando was fighting ZDP, and we were fighting them on social media, saying that they've not been loyal to Zimbabwe as Zimbabwe was loyal for the independence of South Africa. Eventually, I was invited for a meeting with one of the high-ranking officials of the ANC and the government of South Africa, and we had an agreement. They were going to ensure that the issue of sanctions in Zimbabwe were put at the same level as Palestine, Sahrawi, and Cuba. And I
Right.
think you saw that happening with Panale Dipando. And next, when we have elections, they were not going to take the side of the opposition because they had bought into the narrative that the sanctions on Zimbabwe are the cause of the refugees, and the sanctions on Zimbabwe were imposed in order to bring a puppet government in Zimbabwe
In
in
place,
terms
yeah.
of the opposition. That
Right.
was bought hook, line, and sink, so we were secure there. So by now, things are moving, but I'm not getting money. That's where Temba comes in. So now for Temba to say, I'm extorting, he couldn't say that because he knows the truth. He knows the facts. He knows that there was money outstanding, and he knows that the total amount of this money was supposed to be $6 million, and he wanted to ensure that he can get either a percentage, a portion, and get his cut in the process. But now he was coming back to tell me, no, this guy is under sanctions. He doesn't have money to pay. And I told him that's nonsense. So I kept
So,
on pressuring.
so the financier, when he went to the financier, the case was put. I mean, he convinced. I know Temba, he can sweet talk. So he convinced, and the money gets paid, to him. But
No, no,
instead
no,
of,
no, 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 no.
yeah,
Temba
what
didn't get paid.
happened?
Temba didn't get paid.
Oh, he
Temba
didn't
was
get paid.
probably given money to tell me, to pacify me and tell me that there's no
Oh,
money at the moment.
also, you mean with this akapiwa choko muhomwe with the
Chakega,
ayu.
yes, Chakega.
Ah,
Manager Munu.
right.
Manager Moon Uyu. Right
Ah,
now,
right.
right? And that's what he came to tell me. But what he didn't know is I had spoken to Junior in October of 2022.
Uh-huh.
And Junior had said, we've got money that is getting released. And in that money that is getting released, you're going to get your money. So don't worry.
Right.
October passes, November passes, no answer. And remember, I'd gone to the DG as well to complain that we've got lawyers in South Africa who are not
Uh-huh.
prepared. Yet this case is central to Zimbabwe's image, its re-engagement, and pressuring the Americans to continue re-engaging because the Americans need to talk to you to stop our case. And the DG confirmed that the ambassador in America had been approached by the Americans to say, who are these people with the case in South Africa? It's embarrassing us, right? It's embarrassing us. It's causing us diplomatic issues with South Africa because every time we pressure South Africa not to support you, all of a sudden South Africa is saying, go and answer the papers in the courts.
Right.
Prove to us that your sanctions are legitimate. Our courts have a case. Use that to create the precedents that proves that your sanctions are legitimate. The Americans were not willing. Eventually, Biden had to respond to the papers that we had in the South African courts because of that pressure. So the
Ah.
ambassador said, yes. I mean, the DG said, yes, our ambassadors are being pressured, both on South African side and American side, to answer.
When you say DG for the benefit of those, when you say DG, what does that mean?
Director General of CIO, the main man at CIO, the
Right.
CEO of CIO.
Yes. No, it's for
Right.
the benefit of those, not a clue to the lingo. But anyway, go ahead.
So after we gave the report to the DG, he said, I'm going to write a report. So tomorrow you must visit Linus Mafumo, you do a debrief, and then I'll take your report to the president. He is the one who make the final decision as to what happens. We do this, I do the debrief, report is written, it goes through to the president. 2 months later, the answer comes back to me from one of the people that was invited to be in the meeting with us. One of the people who was involved in trying to recruit me into CIO for this very same DG. He is the one who then comes back to me and says, listen here, man. The DG was given a response by the president. The president
Right.
says, you must talk to Kuda. The DG has no authority to help you financially. The finances have been given and authority has been given to Kuda. So Kuda will deal with you.
Right.
DG can't give you any money from his funds. Kuda has been given everything you need. So now I'm now empowered by this. I go back. I'm now forgotten what Temba was saying, and I'm saying, I'm told that you are the one who's supposed to deal with us.
Yes.
Plus, Junior is saying there was money that was supposed to have come out in October. Where's the money?
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So we keep pressuring. Nothing happens. We even stop talking. It could have from 2001, almost all the way until 2000. I mean 2002, 2000, going to 2003. I don't talk to him until we get to 2004, when the sanctions are removed.
No. I revise your dates. I revise your dates. Because you're
Right.
talking about 2002, 2001.
Sorry,
No.
sorry, no, 2022, 2022,
Right, okay.
2022. Sorry, my brother. 2022. So
Mm.
2022, we don't get any money. 2023, we don't get any money. 2024, sanctions are removed. In fact, late 2023, the South Africans start contacting me. Now, all along, I had no contact with the South African lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
They were dealing with Chitando. Chitando had made it clear that, bro, I want you to stick to your lane, and I stick to my lane. And there had been this reputation that Rutendo is a control freak, and so because of being called a control freak, I had to give away that power and say, fine, you deal with lawyers, I don't deal with lawyers, you do it.
You're
The
right.
lawyers start phoning me. They were talking to Stando, but they didn't have joy from Stando. Stando is saying Rutendo was given the money. I don't know what he did with it. So they get in touch with me through Bright Matonga.
Okay,
Bright
Bright, yes.
Matonga calls me, says, hey, Baba, the South Africans are going to the media. They're going to the SABC. They are saying you took all the money, you chowed it, you haven't paid them a cent.
Right.
I'm like, what? But we paid them. But I know that there's money outstanding. So
Uh-huh.
anyway, he gives them my number. He gives them my number, and we get in touch. We start talking. Then they say we haven't been paid, and we've done all the work. We've answered papers. It's Biden. We've gotten Biden to respond. That's a lot of work. That's a very big favor for you guys as Zimbabweans. Why aren't you paying us? So then I start putting pressure again in Harare. This is
So
what we are.
Biden responded.
Yes, but Biden responded through Wim Trengove. I think he's one of the best advocates in South Africa, and
Right.
Weber Windsor. And the response came through a diplomatic note given by the embassy. And he was
Ah.
basically saying our president cannot be. So that's 13 months later.
Mm-hmm.
So this means that the pressure that South Africans had been putting, because they kept updating us, DECO or the Department of International Relations kept saying, we've sent this letter to the United States, we're waiting for a response. Every time they get a response, they would give us an update. 13 months
Ah.
later, we then
Mm.
received this response. We are using Weber Winslow and Wim Trengove as our lawyers
Mm-hmm.
and advocate,
Mm-hmm.
and we are saying that the US president does not have any, the courts of South Africa have no jurisdiction on him, and
On him, yes.
we are evoking immunity, which is traditional.
Response, that
Custom.
comes, during years.
So we said, but so Simba now had an opportunity. He always said that Biden came down to our level. He says that gave us an opportunity to respond and say, but we've got a precedence of Grace Mugabe
Mm-hmm.
hitting a South African girl with the cord. After hitting South African girl with the cord,
The
decision
immunity
got
thing,
immunity.
sort of kicked
It,
in, yeah.
it was challenged by AfriForum and it was reversed. So we are also saying Biden has used his executive order powers to threaten South African banks to coerce them to implement sanctions under the threat of prosecution and asset forfeiture and even secondary sanctions. So we believe that he's the one causing South African banks to break South African law. With,
Right.
with the response put in, I think 5 or 4 days after Simba put in that response, sanctions were removed. So the lawyers felt a
So this is
direct.
where this is where the claim to fame, comes in, because I've seen, questions being raised. Rutendo, I don't think become sanctions. Makamona munhu wana with sanctions kupi. How did he do it? Well,
But
I
the
mean,
claim
I've
to
just
fame,
let you, to speak, right now, because I needed, to understand.
yeah.
For me to understand you, when you say Kutizo, I am responsible for the removal of sanctions, in Zimbabwe. Because me, I couldn't even understand. But Rutendo is on record saying Kutizo is responsible. How did he do it? So all these processes and all these steps and everything, that happened, from the filing of the court case to everything, 30 months later, Biden, responding via, via a channel, and getting to the removal of these sanctions, it was all because of this process that you instituted.
And not only that, remember,
Eh.
in turning the South African government that was putting really big, huge diplomatic pressure on America, yet it is the most important government on the African continent that they need to be on their side. That government had turned against them because they were saying your sanctions are bringing refugees into our country and we can't deliver services. So we cannot continue to support your sanctions. We are going against them and our courts will make a decision against them. And once a court in South Africa makes a decision against them, it's precedents that could affect their ability to implement sanctions in Africa in future. That's number two. Number three, we brought the UN. The UN then made a report to say these sanctions were contrary to international law and they were violating human rights. Number four, and the biggest and the most important factor, was Congress got in touch with me through their legal advisor, senior legal advisor. That was not just a senior legal advisor, she was a liaison to the White House, she was a liaison to the Department of State, and a liaison of the Department of Defense. That lady came and asked, you are making so much noise. This is in 2021 on Independence Day. We were doing a presentation at the ZANU-PF School of Ideology on how we are going to fight sanctions. And this poster landed up in the hands of a friend of mine in Ghana who sent it to this lady in Washington. And then she also had they've been talking about these issues. So they got in touch. What do we do for you guys to stop making this anti-American noise? If we remove sanctions on civilians, will you be happy? He said, no, all sanctions, because even the ones on politicians, you have not tried them. So you need to remove them. Then she said, but how do we do this? Then I said, follow the processes of the United Nations. The United Nations has got a process to say before you institute sanctions, you must do an impact assessment, human rights impact assessment. And then you impose sanctions knowing where not to hit so that you don't affect civilians. Then after 1 year, you must do another impact assessment. And I said, you haven't done that in 21 years. You're supposed to have been doing an impact assessment every year, doing a report and mitigating the problems that are caused on human rights. So do an impact assessment. If you see that your sanctions are hurting civilians and depriving them of human rights, then remove them. So they agreed. That's when they went to Pollard. And the congresswoman who's currently the mayor of Los Angeles is the one who wrote a letter to Pollard saying, we're coming to do an impact assessment. That's 1 month after I spoke to them. And then they did the impact assessment and wrote a report to Biden. The same Congress that asked for Desidera to impose sanctions then wrote a report to Biden saying you need to remove the sanctions because they're depriving women, children, and civilians of healthcare and the enjoyment of their human rights. That particular thing was the real last straw that broke the camel's back.
Wow. You're dropping names. I'm not saying that, we are trying to be pacifying people here into believing, your story. But I needed, to understand. And the way that, you're articulating, yourself and, the evidence, because, these names that you're dropping, these are real people and they exist. And we can fact check them. We can fact check, with them if they decide, to want to, go against you and say, oh, he's lying or etc. But you're dropping, these names, and
And it's deliberate. It's deliberate, Uncle. Because yesterday you saw that Joshua went to a platform being asked questions about things I had said. And in that, he made certain admissions. Remember, I had said in the afternoon, I'm trying to extort as a billionaire.
yes.
Joshua came and acknowledged this man has a relationship with the billionaire. The billionaire gave money towards the court cases that were fought in South Africa, and he gave a certain amount of money. That went on to prove that I had a contractual relationship with the billionaire. The billionaire committed to certain amounts of monies. Those monies were given. The question that was left after Joshua spoke is whether the billionaire had paid all the money or not. So I was irritated by what Joshua said. But Joshua only came and spoke to corroborate what I'm saying because I've been name dropping. Right now, I've name dropped the name of the mayor of Los Angeles, who is Karen Bass. She was the head of the subcommittee on human rights, health, and organization. Anybody who wants to check what I'm saying must check if Pollard and the Congress met and did a human rights impact assessment, and whether that human rights impact assessment brought out a public document from the Congress of the United States that went to the President of the United States asking for sanctions to be removed. That happened, but that document remains classified, yet it is supposed to be a public document. Why? Because it proves that the United States had sanctions on Zimbabwe that were hurting civilians. And if that went into the public domain, we can use it to ask for reparations and damages.
Right. But okay, let me ask you this because I want to then pivot to a conversation on the CAP 3 bill. But I want to ask you in terms of, because you've said quite a lot in terms of the promises that were not met, the monies that were not paid, the obligations that were made. But what was the motivation for you to continue, given you're facing all these challenges, left, right, and center? You're having people coming to you demanding money. But what was the motivation for you to go on,
Look,
knowing that the money wasn't coming?
look, I've got a marketing consultancy. And
Uh-huh.
as marketers, it's very difficult, especially if you're in the communication space, to prove the value of your work.
Mhm.
I knew that removing sanctions on Zimbabwe would illustrate in a clear and concrete way how PR can work when used correctly. I wanted to also be a Zimbabwean who contributes to doing something that changes the lives of 16 million people, because that
Right.
goes into the history books. And I
Mhm.
knew that this would build my profile. And today you see me going to Rwanda, you see me going to Nigeria, you see me going to the AU. I was being invited to Eritrea to go and speak to them about how they can fight their own sanctions. This has brought me a lot of other opportunities,
Uh-huh.
because we stuck with this job. So the payment is something that I would love to change my life, change my children's life. But the experience, the story, I can write a book now. I can release the book. Right now, what was stopping me from releasing the book is complications in the aspect that there are so many sensitive people's names in this chapter. Some of
Mm.
whose stories they look benevolent, but they've also been non-benevolent. And now I get to a point where I can write those stories and expose some of the characters of the people we trust as patriots, but realize that some of the activities were not patriotic. So I can write that book now. But this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone through this story, if I hadn't walked this journey, right? The relationships we've created here. We've created relationships in America, relationships with international lawyers like John Philpott in Canada. I had an opportunity to present. I'm not a lawyer, but I had an
Mm.
opportunity to present to the AFBA, or African Bar of Lawyers, to tell them about sanctions, how sanctions work, and how they can litigate and help us to litigate as African countries against sanctions, because Africa continues to be the most sanctioned continent. So
Mm.
I did it because there was opportunities there, but I also wanted to serve my nation, and fortunately, we succeeded. Now, people ask, where do you get the number of 4 million? Remember, we said we wanted 6 million for the case, but the case didn't last
Yes.
as long as we thought. We thought the case would last a long time. So the 6
Uh-huh.
million in terms of legal billing is no longer relevant. But the results of the work, when we compare to other lobbyists who were paid 4 million and failed, I believe that 4 million needs to start as the starting point of what we need to get paid for achieving the results that other people were paid for failing.
Right. Yeah, I remember, there was a time where a lobbyist group in America, I think, ended up being sued for, going against, is it against, the Logan Act? Is it, the Logan
Bro,
Act?
you got arrested for not complying with FARA. FARA is the Foreign Agents Reporting Act. So
Oh,
every
yes, yes,
person
yes,
who
yes.
becomes a lobbyist for a foreign country in America must register with the Department of Justice. They must submit monthly reports on how it is that they are lobbying for the other people, the strategy of the lobbying, and the results of the lobbying, who they are talking to, and so forth. So this guy, he was not following that process. He was an American. He was lobbying for a foreigner in America, influencing Congress people, influencing government officials without registering with the DOG and not reporting back to the DOG. So that is seen as what do you call this word? Treason. It's treason.
Yes, yes, yeah,
Yeah,
treason,
yeah,
yes.
because you're plotting with outsiders to influence our officials for the objectives of a foreign government, but you're not informing us what you're doing it for and how you're doing it.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining me, thank you very much, for coming through. I'm here having a conversation, with Rutendo. I know the conversation, is dragged on. I've let it drag on, for a reason. He is my guest speaker here, and he has got, the button for him, to speak. I know there are folks, that want, to speak. I'll give you the opportunity, to speak. I'll ask, Rutendo, if you can extend, the conversation, but we'll give you guys, the opportunity, to speak. But having said all this, Rutendo, I appreciate and I thank you very much for being honest and candid in your conversation. Right now it is up to you guys, to evaluate, what he says, whether you believe him or you don't. But I needed, him to sort of articulate how we ended up in a position where he says he's responsible for the removal of my sanctions. But these conversations, they're happening at a critical moment. I've referred to that in my introduction. A critical moment, a constitutional moment. So Rutendo, I want us to pivot to the constitutional amendment bill number 3. I know folks, have good questions. They're going to ask you questions that will make you revisit some of the things, that you have said. I'm just here to facilitate, that conversation and make it, going. But some have taken it to be a political, distraction at a very crucial, moment. We've seen, events unfolding, things, happening with regards to the constitutional amendment bill, number 3. We are in the 90-day, period. We have had those, what do you call them, consultations, which were marked by, one-sided way of doing things, violence, abduction, torture of people, etc., etc. But the conversation is not dead. Some folks, thought that, by having, those, 4 days, the conversation, was going to be dying. And in the past week, we've been having, this conversation. You at the center of these, controversies. This is why I started with this controversies, because we want to get them out of the way and sort of pivot to what is important and what we need, to be focusing on. In your own way and in your own articulation about the moment, that we are at the present moment. Why do you think that we should never be distracted by these things, that are happening?
Yeah, we shouldn't be distracted, because what is the core essence or the core values or the core promise between us as nation men in the creation of our commonwealth is being attacked. Mm-hmm. And it is being attacked and eroded in a manner that is going to change the intention of the original constitution, which, like the former general Muchena said yesterday, is the first constitution that has been created by us Zimbabweans without coercion and without pressure from outsiders. Mm-hmm. And as a result, we've got this constitution, one that was written by a COPEC or a committee in which the president, who is currently presiding, was actually a chairman. So the product of this chairmanship of his was this document that they sold us. ZANU-PF has sold it and sold this as our core document or our core agreement or our core promise to each other as citizens and the nationals of Zimbabwe on how we are going to conduct ourselves and the rules that we're going to abide by. And now that very same foundation is being eroded by the president who presided as the chairman of the very same committee that created it. Yet, this very same president has done one of the most unpopular things in Zimbabwe, which is to compensate white farmers for developments or vandalism on our land. And he said that he was going to continue to abide by that because we are sticking to the constitution. And instead of changing the constitution so that we don't compensate white farmers with money that we do not have, he decided to change the constitution on a fundamental area for which this constitution was made, which is to stop presidents in this country from being life presidents after the experience of Robert Mugabe. So for me, there are contradictions there. That men and women sat and agreed that we're going to create a constitution. And at the center of this constitution shall be term limits so that people do not become life presidents, so that people do not continue to stick and stay in power for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. We also want to ensure that in the spirit of trying to make sure that they're limited terms, we're going to put in safeguards that will make sure that when a person comes into power, he serves 2 terms. Those 2 terms will be 5-year terms. And once they are done, they leave. We are now
Right.
changing those fundamental parts of the Constitution deceptively without trying to look at the spirit and intent of those that made that Constitution. That for me is problematic. And that is why I am not happy. But what has made me unhappy is less to do with the bastardization of the Constitution, but it is the fact that ZANU-PF can put in a bill saying that we want to change the Constitution, understand that they have to follow the formalities as put in our Constitution on how to do it, but then they don't want to follow those processes. So when people are supposed to have consultations to debate the bill, those people are locked up. Those people are beaten up. Those people have their offices burnt. And initially, I was one of the people that said Mandaza has burnt his own offices, Sikala has burnt his own house, Maduko has beaten himself.
Yeah, beating himself. And the BT has attacked himself as well in the process.
No, by the time BT got arrested, I was now sure that there's a sinister motive from the government.
Right.
Why? Because there was no investigation. From the first terrorist act that took place at Sapes, the government of Zimbabwe will arrest a person who's got a cartridge of a bullet and they will beat him up until they find out where the bullet and the gun is because they are afraid of terrorists. But for some reason, when it came to this terrorism of people who bomb a building, they did not have the same voraciousness and appetite to catch the criminals and to keep updating the public on what was happening. And automatically I started realizing that, oh, okay, they're involved. Because criminals, you've seen when there's the guy who was murdering people, they deployed the army. The army would not sleep day and night, going up mountains, hunting for him until they got him.
Yes.
That is what our security system has got a capacity to find criminals very quickly, except in this case. That's when we realized, oh no, the government is complicit. And we began to believe all the other allegations made by opposition members when we never believed you before. Now, for me, that was a betrayal because when you guys were being beaten during the sanctions, as far as I was concerned, you went into a war in which you looked for weapons to punish your co-citizens collectively with a weapon called sanctions. And then those people were not as sophisticated as you. They took sticks, they beat you up. It was a war. But the war is gone. The war is gone. We are citizens trying to unite ourselves into one country, one nation, one people, and to break down these divides and polarizations in our political parties. And now we are beating people for doing something that you have evoked. They evoked this process by starting to put in a bill. Why put in a bill if you're not willing for the bill to go through the processes your own president spelled out in the Constitution?
But they're arguing that this process here does not require a referendum because they're not touching the aspect of the constitution that require a referendum.
It's madness.
How do we balance that?
It's madness for people to speak of a term, but yet they don't accept the codified and defined term, which is 5 years, and they don't accept that that 5 years is a limit. Hence, they are coming and trying to create a bill to change the law so that they can extend it to 7 years. It's madness. How do you say it's a 5-year, it's a 2-year maximum term, but you don't have an agreement on what a term is? But yet the Constitution is clear that every 5 years, elections have to be called and Parliament gets dissolved. Why would we have that if it was not a term limit? Why would ZANU-PF adhere to the 5-year terms and have elections every 5 years if it wasn't a term limit? Because they could just extend it without having to ask for permission. They're extending it. They're asking for permission. They've created a legal instrument to try and make the change because it is a term limit. And their own bill says that their intention is to extend from 5 years to 7 years. The Constitution is clear that any time you want to change a term limit to increase the amount of time of an incumbent in office, that requires a referendum. And an incumbent cannot enjoy a
Right.
change to a term limit that they have done in their own or previous, if they've been in power before, they cannot enjoy it. So a referendum is required to change the constitution to allow an incumbent to enjoy that. Because we are now
Right.
looking at a conflict of interest where you've
Right.
got.
There are people, that have, there are people that have argued that you are in support of the bill, but what you are not in support of this bill excluding, the referendum. Can you speak to that?
Right. I am in support of the extension of the tenure to 7 years. So
Uh
that,
huh.
because we are currently spending 2.5 years electioneering, bickering about the elections, and then the government only gets about 2.5 years to implement.
Uh huh.
However, right now we've been in electioneering mode for 2 years now. With this CAB bill, we are going to go probably into 3 years electioneering.
Yes.
And so for me now, I don't even know if we can continue to justify that the 7 years will make a difference, because ZANU-PF has currently wasted 3 years just bickering about electioneering and trying to extend the limit. So I was okay with the 7 years,
Uh
right?
huh.
But I was okay with the 7 years if it can be extended for this cycle to end, and then the next cycle we make the change. So the incumbent here would make the change, but he wouldn't enjoy that benefit, and then it would be enjoyed by the next president that comes, because that shows good faith and goodwill that he's not doing it for his own benefit to stay in power forever.
Right.
But
For a
but
person, for a person who gave us a good story about Zimbabwe, because on that big good story, it was I think it was underpinned or underscored by the fact Kuti, you believed there was some development that were happening in the country. So is it not justified to say that the president he needs his extra 2 years because there are some projects that he still needs to complete? So just give him the 2 years so that he goes all the way and he completes his project, because you championed that. You were a vocal supporter of this president, and you're saying that there's a good story in Zimbabwe. At what point did that good story stop to exist
right,
in your mind?
the good story, if you remember the story that I told you about me and Joshua meeting, writing a
Yeah.
proposal to say we have become demeaned, we've become cartoons, we've become caricatures in foreign
Mhm.
countries, particularly in South Africa. There's no more
Mhm.
respect for Zimbabweans. We are seen as people who come from a country that doesn't exist. We are demeaned at every turn because we have given a narrative about our own country as a Popeye country, as a shithole. And as such, I believe that we need to rehumanize ourselves by telling a story of the human success in Zimbabwe as well. So it was part of
Right.
redeeming our image outside to Europe, in Zimbabwe, in Africa, so that we can be seen as human beings again, can be respected once again, and so that investment can even come into the country so that we can begin to develop the things we are complaining about. When you are doing PR, you tell the
Mhm.
good story. You do not
Right.
compare it with the bad story. Because
Uh-huh.
everybody else is telling the bad story, you choose to tell the story that is not being told, which is the good story. That
Mhm.
does not mean that the good outweighs the bad. It means that, like a
Right.
child that, you've got a child who's not so good in school. If you want to motivate them to read, to study, you give them praise for when they do good. And eventually they'll start to study and begin to improve their marks, and they'll begin to actually become a pass student. And what we believed is by complementing this government, we would be able to criticize internally, make the changes we needed. Like when they were not willing to fight sanctions, but I got to fight
Mhm.
sanctions because they loved me for what I was doing. They allowed
Right.
me to do things they would not have necessarily allowed a critique to do. And so now that was okay when we're promoting the country, trying to get investment in, and trying to promote Zimbabweans in the diaspora to come back home and invest. And I think we can all agree, guys, that you've seen so many Zimbabweans become so positive to invest more in Zimbabwe. They want businesses in Zimbabwe, they want mines in
Mhm.
Zimbabwe because of the good stories we are telling. However, the president has now begun to insist that we want this term extension that you like, but we want it for me, right?
Mhm.
And now I'm
Mhm.
saying, okay, Mr. President, if you want it for you, I need to know why I should give it to you. Then he says, I need to finish the work that I started. Then I said, okay, how much work have you done? Let's do the math.
Yes.
How many
Uh-huh.
roads have you built? How many clinics have you built? How many hospitals have you built? What have you done? And
And
what do
your
we
mess is
see?
not mathing because I've seen you, bringing out, these issues, asking questions, saying, the math is not mathing here. Come on now.
Those who are proponents of this president say he's done better than Mugabe. Then I say, okay, Mugabe in 20 years built 9,000 kilometers of road. How many roads have you built in 10 years, Mr. President? He's built 1.2.
Right.
Mugabe scores better. So it doesn't necessarily come out that he deserves a term extension because he's a very good president, because he's a very good president compared to who? Because when I compare him with Mugabe, he's not touching Mugabe. When I compare him with Ramaphosa, he's not touching Ramaphosa. So who is he a good president compared to deserve the term extension? Now we are no longer trying to be telling a PR story. We are now doing what is called a balanced scorecard or an evaluation or an examination of the person that wants to get another chance based on merit. So we have to weigh the merit. So I have to throw away my hat of telling the good Zimbabwe story. Internally in our house, I start doing a balanced scorecard. How much did you do? How much didn't you do? You did 1,200 kilometers of roads in a country that's got 18,600 kilometers of bad road. Is that good or bad? If you go at the current rate that you're going, how many roads are you going to build in the next 2 years? I realize you're doing 320, 360 kilometers. Is that good enough for me to give you 2 years? I don't think so. Because I want a president, and I'm hoping that the next president, and I was arguing then that the next president is the billionaire that I liked, would come in, and I think he would do more than 1,200 kilometers of roads in 5 years. Why? Because he's got
Right.
the capital. Why? Because he's got relationships with the World Economic Forum, and the World Economic Forum has got the capital to give him. Why? Because he came up with the title deed story, and the title deed story could be used to bring in funds because we can collateralize our land now. So I now believed that there was a man who could raise money, and that money that could be raised could give us more roads than the roads I'm being given by the current president who wants the extension. We are now becoming critical. But when I became that critical and I said that the performance of the current president is mediocre, I was then deemed to have insulted the president.
Yes. Yeah, you became an enemy of the president.
But the problem with being me and having done the good Zimbabwe story is I know every corner of Zimbabwe. I know how
Ah.
pathetic our delivery has been. I know the levels of
Well, if
poverty.
somebody accuses you of lying in that Zimbabwean story, I mean, how do you respond to that? That,
Look,
you were feeding people fibs, telling people, the wrong thing. And it seems as if, the criticism that were going out there were much bigger than, this good story, that that you were telling now, that you were telling us.
Look, I believe that when I make a big deal about the airport exists. When I make a
Uh-huh.
big deal about the quality of the drive from here to Masvingo compared to what it was some years before, it's a much better drive. It's a pretty good road. When I talk about the GDP growth, when I talk about the increase in mining, the increase in exports, the increase in tobacco production, these are all factual stories. I'm not
Yes.
manufacturing them. The only thing is I am omitting the things that have not been done.
Ah, right.
So I am choosing to say, let's focus on the glass half full. I mean, the glass half empty, rather than the glass half full rather than the glass
That's empty.
half empty. Why?
Right.
Because I want Jed to want to come back home.
Yes.
I want Tabani not to want to go and invest in the United Kingdom, but to keep his money in Zimbabwe. I
Right.
want our people to bank in our country. Hence, we are now finding foreign currency in our ATMs. There's a level of confidence that has risen in Zimbabwe that is making things almost normal now. We are seeing money coming out of the ATM. We've got fuel in the petrol pumps. When I tell the story about Kudata Gure eliminating fuel queues, it's not a fallacy. He did it. The pipeline was taken over, and he was given the pipeline by an MDC, Minister of Trade, if I'm not mistaken. Trade or the energy one.
Yeah, the energy
Elton. It
one.
was Elton,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, Elton Mangoma.
And guys, that pipeline starting to bring in fuel, starting to make sure there's fuel in Masasa, is the reason why right now there's war in Iran, but we're still filling our tanks instead of running into queues. Those are positive stories. And I was telling these positive stories of a man that I already had issues with, but I believed that his successes outweighed my differences and personal differences with him.
Right. Okay, let me go to the last question on the events, that happened, last week, with the consultation, period, the 4-day period. We also, what happened. There were issues where those with an opposite view, they would have their mics silenced, mics grabbed, and we've even witnessed the Harare City sports where Dagi Quartet was attacked. His phone was stolen from this allegedly ZANU-PF Central Committee member, the one who sits in the highest decision, making body. Tendaibiti was there, not given the opportunity. Fazema was there, not given, the opportunity. And this was witnessed across, the country. Only, and if you want to count the number of people that gave, their presentations, only if I don't think they even get, to a thousand people who gave, like their recorded presentation as to why they're supporting, this bill. And those that were opposite to this bill, they were not even given an opportunity and a chance. And I've seen, I don't know whether it is his, Patrick, Shinamasa, telling us that that process was a ZANU-PF, process. And he laments the fact that we had people, opposition, merchants of of doom, or merchants of the external forces that want to make a regime change in Zimbabwe in action. I've also heard here on the space that some people are believing that the people that went there, they did not even go there to make a presentation, but to cause a scene so that Zimbabwe goes back on the map. So all those things, happened. But we've got 40 days. What are we supposed to be doing, in those 40 days? Is this thing, dead?
First of all, I think what happened has been coined and captured very well by the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. And the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission is not a creation of an NGO. It is a creation of our state. It is a creation of our constitution, because it's a Chapter 12 institution.
Yes.
That Chapter 12 institution, which is not led by the opposition, announced that the process was unfree, unfair, and prejudicial. And they have been very clear that people were denied mics. Some places they say that anyone who was not accepted or approved by young people who were at the gate holding whips and stopping people from entering in. A lot of these processes, the opposition or opposing members were not allowed to give their comments. However, I want to say to Zimbabweans, don't focus on that. Because I think all in total, there are less than 5,000 people who got an opportunity to speak. However, between now and the 17th of May is an opportunity for each and every one of us to submit a written submission. One in which you can be thorough, you can be detailed, it can be done professionally, where you write your grievances and issues with each and every clause. No person who spoke at any of these events had enough time to articulate, point for point, the pros and the cons. But now in writing, you can do that, pros and cons. But the problem is that even when this process started, a lot of you were not proactive in questioning the process and the adjudicators of the process, because you have allowed the parliamentarians who have an interest in this bill to be the ones who sit and preside over who talks, who speaks, who comes and gets the mic. That was stupid. So we should have gotten we should have gotten independent bodies and auditors who would have been able to be part and parcel of that process to ensure that only the right people can speak without bias. So that's the first problem. Second problem, even these written submissions, we're still going to take them to a parliament and give them to the parliamentarians who are the ones with a vested interest to be given an extension in office, even though most of them have performed dismally in their jobs. So what we now need to do is to ensure that this process is concise. We, the citizens, who feel that maybe what we are going to write is not going to be taken seriously, need to put in safeguards of our own, be it an auditing firm, an accounting firm, a legal firm, that is going to collect the written submissions of bodies and take them to parliament, but record and have copies of each and every citizen's issue. If everybody did that in an organized manner, and you submitted 200,000 write-ups, and we knew what was in those write-ups, by the time that the parliament reaches a decision, we've got evidence that we can take to court to say, right, we heard that there were 400,000 submissions. We put in 200,000 submissions in opposition. However, the decision is saying there was an overwhelming majority of people supporting it. Where is the evidence? That law firm or that auditing firm can then be part and parcel of the process of verifying.
Right.
They can verify the credence of these write-ups. They can read through these write-ups to determine whether they illustrate that the majority of submissions were in support. And they can also question whether the changes and remedial actions that were required before this bill was passed were taken. So you now have to organize yourselves. Number two, one thing that we are hearing is that ZANU-PF is going for referendum. They are prepared. That's why they're flying helicopters. That's why they've got all these stickers. That's why they've got all these posters. And there's a chance that that referendum will be either asked for by Parliament itself, and they will be prepared. They are already on the campaign trail, but the opposition will be found flat-footed because you're busy criticizing the process without organizing yourself. So you don't have the people who are going to go on the road shows. You don't have the money to go on the road shows. You don't have the tents. You don't have the stages. You don't have the helicopters. You don't have the cars. You're already flat-footed. You do not have the cells. You do not have organized structures because opposition is not literally dead. You don't have cells. You don't have sales leaders. So it's going to be difficult for you to put your information out there. So we are saying instead of you focusing on this minute issue, you need to start opening your strategic thinking to organizing yourselves to have people who can be on the ground to do this process. You have to get the door-to-door campaign once again going. You've got to get people talking to each other and passing information. So when we come to groups like this, let's not just sit here and talk about two clauses. We should now be going through each and every point and clause, looking at the pros and the cons, and interrogating what is good for Zimbabwe and what is not. And then you put in your written submissions. But those written submissions must then be photocopied, they must be archived, they must be configured, and you must then make sure that they are taken in by a body with recognition, a legal firm, an auditing firm, and create institutions, create registered organs that will have recognition and corporate recognition to then go and fight these things in court if the time and it comes right. But be prepared for the referendum because all this process you can do will mean nothing if ZANU-PF accepts a referendum, then begins to say 1, 2, 3 on your marks, get set, go for a referendum, and you guys are not prepared. You've got to copy the blueprint of what it is that that institution, Broad-Based Civil Alliance, did in 2000. I don't support the organization, but the guys were organized. I remember coming from South Africa, listening to Tendai BT speaking, and I was convinced. And only now, in hindsight, I then think, oh my God, I was duped. But that's how organized that group of people were.
Absolutely.
And I believe that right now, that's what we need. Now, why do we need this? We need a vibrancy in our democracy. Because currently, when you look at the democracy we have, it's a dead democracy. The fact that a Rutendo, who's not a lawyer, had to rise up to fight sanctions when you've got a parliament, and that parliament did not take any steps to fight sanctions. They didn't take any steps to fight GMOs. They haven't taken any steps to deal with the Chinese companies that continue to destroy our environment. They didn't take any steps to deal with Mazoe Dam that's got no water. We've got a dead democracy, and we've got dead, non-participant citizens in Zimbabwe. We need citizenry activism that was alive in the 2000s. Even though what you did, we were opposing it, but you guys were alive and you made our democracy a vibrant democracy. And you asked questions that made changes that even today some of us are beneficiaries of.
Right. Wow. Thank you very much, for that.